The auction hall was buzzing with chatter, the clatter of hooves, and the occasional loud call from the auctioneer. The smell of hay and dust mixed in the air, a scent that spoke of tradition, competition, and the unspoken tension that hung over every bid. Among the crowd stood Claire, a caretaker and lifelong horse lover, her heart racing. She had been hoping to find a sturdy horse to help on the farm, a reliable companion to share the heavy work and provide a spark of life to the quiet fields. What she didn't expect was the chaos that was about to unfold. It started innocently enough. A well-known rancher brought forth a prized horse, sleek and well-mannered, advertised as the perfect farm partner. Bidders leaned forward, eyes glinting, fingers poised over paddles. But amid the confusion of bidding numbers and shouted increments, a mistake happened, a catastrophic, yet strangely fateful error. A horse Claire had not intended to bid on was hammered sold to her. A horse described briefly, dismissed by most, almost overlooked entirely. A rough, spirited stallion with a patchy coat, restless eyes, and a reputation for being unmanageable. Claire froze for a moment, heart sinking. She had just bought the wrong horse. Her mind raced. How would she manage a horse known for being temperamental? Her farm had struggled recently. Crops failing, machinery breaking down, even the other horses were listless after a harsh winter. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. And yet, even as doubt clawed at her, there was something in the horse's eyes, a spark of defiance, wild and untamed, that stirred something inside her. The ride home from the auction was tense. The stallion refused to settle, tossing his head and snorting as Claire struggled to keep him calm. She realized immediately that she had underestimated him. Not a horse to be broken in a single day, or even a week. He seemed to challenge her at every step, his gaze sharp, as if he knew he had been wrongly sent to this farm, to this caretaker. But Claire's determination was fierce. She had faced failure before, and she had learned that resilience often came from the least expected sources. That night, the stallion refused to eat or sleep properly, pacing the barn with a restless energy that felt almost contagious. Claire watched from the doorway, feeling both frustration and awe. She had raised horses before, trained them, loved them, but something about this horse was different. There was a raw intelligence there, a hint of something untamed, almost mythical. It was as if he carried not only his own spirit but the echoes of every challenge that life had thrown in his path. Over the next few days, Claire attempted to establish trust. She offered food by hand, soft murmurs, and steady, calm movements. The horse flinched at the slightest sound, yet gradually, a subtle recognition began to form. He started to follow her around the paddock, not out of obedience, but curiosity. Claire could feel her heart tightening with a mixture of fear and hope. Here was a horse that no one wanted, considered a problem, yet there was an ability in him that made her believe he could be more than the sum of his past mistakes. Meanwhile, the farm itself mirrored the horse's initial chaos. The fence posts needed mending, the irrigation was failing, and a winter storm threatened to undo weeks of labor. Claire's burden felt almost insurmountable. And yet, as she observed the stallion moving through the fields, kicking up dust, she felt a strange sense of alignment. It was as if the farm had been waiting for a spark, for a horse with enough energy, intelligence, and stubbornness to awaken the land. The first mini-crisis arrived unexpectedly. A narrow gate had been left unsecured, and in a flash, the stallion bolted. Claire's heart leapt into her throat as she chased him across the fields. Her boots sank into mud, her lungs burned, but she refused to give up. And then, something miraculous happened. Instead of bolting away completely, the stallion paused, ears flicking toward her voice, recognition in his wild eyes. That brief pause gave Claire the opening she needed to approach him calmly, using every ounce of patience she had learned over years of working with animals. By the time he finally allowed her to lead him back into the barn, Claire's heart was pounding, sweat dripping down her face. She realized something profound. This horse was not just a challenge, he was a mirror. He reflected every fear, every hesitation, and yet every capacity for courage that existed within her. The farm, which had felt lifeless and burdened, seemed to hum with possibility. The wrong horse, the auction mistake, had introduced the first spark of hope. That night, as snow began to fall lightly over the paddocks, Claire sat beside him, her hand brushing the rough texture of his coat. She whispered stories of the farm, of her dreams, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, he relaxed. Trust was fragile, yet it had begun. The bond was forming, not instant, not easy, but undeniable. And in that moment, she knew that their story was only beginning. But the story had to continue beyond mere trust. The farm faced greater threats: illness among the livestock, the risk of losing a season's harvest, and the constant reminder that they were struggling to survive. Yet, somewhere in the depths of this wild horse, Claire sensed the solution. The very energy, courage, and determination that had made him unmanageable might be exactly what the farm needed. Every step forward was a mini-victory. The first time he allowed her to brush him without tension, the first time he followed her willingly through the paddock, the first soft whicker as she approached. Each moment created suspense, tiny spikes of wonder and relief, as if the horse and farm were dancing toward an inevitable revelation. And Claire knew, deep in her heart, that what had seemed like a mistake, the auction error, might just turn into the greatest gift her farm had ever received. As the night deepened and the snow fell thicker, Claire whispered softly, almost as if speaking to herself as much as to him, "We've got work to do, but maybe, just maybe, you're the one who can save us all." And so began a journey of trust, challenge, and hope, a journey that would test their patience, resilience, and hearts in ways neither could have imagined. The next morning arrived with a sharp chill, frost glittering across the paddocks like a blanket of crystal. Claire awoke before dawn, boots in hand, heart thrumming with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The stallion, still unnamed, stood by the fence, muscles coiled, eyes alert, tail flicking with nervous energy. He was beautiful, yes, but untamed, and every instinct told Claire that the day ahead would be a test of both patience and courage. The first challenge came almost immediately. As she approached with breakfast, the stallion's nostrils flared. A gust of wind shook the loose branches of a nearby tree, and he bolted, not a playful dash, but a full-out sprint across the muddy fields, hooves slapping hard against the frozen ground. Claire cursed under her breath, sprinting after him, her boots slipping in the mud. But amid the chaos, something remarkable happened. He didn't disappear into the distant woods. Instead, he paused atop a small rise, ears flicking toward her, muscles tense, eyes full of wild intelligence. It was a standoff, a silent negotiation. Claire slowed her pace, speaking softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's okay. I'm here, just come to me." She could feel every heartbeat between them, a tether forming from fear, trust, and mutual curiosity. Slowly, deliberately, he trotted toward her, nose dipping cautiously to sniff her hand. This was progress, the first tangible sign that their bond could grow beyond mutual suspicion. But just as trust began to bloom, the farm's troubles demanded attention. One of the older cows had slipped in the mud and lain stubbornly in the field, refusing to rise. Claire's heart sank. The horse's restless energy might be the only thing strong enough to help. She grabbed the lead rope and approached the stallion with purpose. At first, he recoiled, muscles coiled like a spring ready to snap. But then, as if sensing the urgency, he allowed her to mount briefly, tentative, careful, and they guided the cow back toward the barn together. Claire felt her breath catch. She had witnessed countless rescues in her life, but this moment was different. The horse's strength, combined with his emerging willingness to work with her, transformed what had seemed impossible into a minor victory. For a brief, shining moment, the farm felt alive again. She whispered to him, "You're more than a mistake, you're a miracle." As the days passed, the stallion's unpredictable nature continued to test her. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in. Rain hammered down, thunder shaking the barn doors, and the horse panicked, rearing and snorting in terror. Claire's hands were raw from trying to calm him, yet she refused to retreat. She stayed close, murmuring encouragement, stepping into his world rather than expecting him to step into hers. Slowly, he lowered his head, shaking water from his manere, until finally, he allowed her to guide him into the shelter. It was exhausting, humbling work. Claire's body ached, her patience frayed, yet she discovered something vital. Resilience is forged in the tension between fear and trust. Every time he tested her limits, every time she felt she might fail, a deeper connection was forming. a bond built on shared struggle, on quiet moments of recognition, on the subtle thrill of discovering that even the wildest heart can choose to trust. And then came the twist that changed everything. One evening, while checking the fences along the northern boundary, Claire noticed unusual tracks in the mud, deep hoofprints that didn't match any of her other horses. Following them led her to a section of the farm long thought unusable, a small, hidden pasture overgrown and neglected. And there, standing in the twilight, was a mare, thin but graceful, watching cautiously. Claire's pulse quickened. She realized the stallion had been leading her to her, a mate, a companion. The discovery brought a flood of hope and fear at once. Could he guide her back to the farm safely? How would she manage the mare without disrupting the fragile trust she had built with the stallion? Claire took a deep breath and approached slowly, remembering every lesson the stallion had taught her about patience, intuition, and empathy. She extended her hand, speaking softly, offering comfort rather than command. The mare sniffed, hesitated, then stepped closer. And in that instant, Claire saw a vision of possibility. If she could unite these two, the farm might finally regain the vitality it had lost. Yet challenges mounted. The stallion, protective and wary, initially bristled at the mare's presence. Tensions rose, hooves struck the ground, ears pinned. Claire felt her heart hammering in her chest. Any sudden move could undo weeks of progress. But she stayed calm, moving with careful intention, murmuring encouragement, creating space for trust to flourish. Slowly, the stallion's posture softened. The mare relaxed as well, ears flicking toward Claire in cautious acknowledgement. Together, they began to navigate the complex dance of trust, dominance, and mutual curiosity. Claire realized that this horse, the one everyone had dismissed at the auction, was more than just a helper for the farm. He was a catalyst, a spark that ignited a chain reaction of life, resilience, and renewal. Every day brought new challenges, mending fences under his watchful eye, guiding the mare to safety during storms, and finding ways to integrate him into farm work without stifling his spirit. Each small victory built confidence, for both horse and caretaker, and each setback strengthened the bond between them. But the psychological tension never truly eased. Claire's nights were restless, filled with worry. What if he bolted again? What if the mare rejected him? What if the farm couldn't survive the coming spring? Yet, in the quiet moments of dawn, as she watched the two horses move together through misty fields, she felt awe. This was the moment when fear met wonder, uncertainty gave way to hope, and life, messy, unpredictable, and utterly magnificent, showed her that sometimes the wrong choice can be the right miracle. By the end of part 2, the stakes had risen significantly. The stallion was no longer just a problem. He had become the linchpin of the farm's revival, a test of Claire's patience, courage, and ingenuity. And while the storm of challenges was far from over, the seeds of trust, empathy, and unexpected solutions had been planted, growing slowly, with a rhythm that mirrored the heartbeat of the land itself. The following week arrived like a tempest, both literally and figuratively. Dark clouds rolled over the farm, casting long shadows across the frost-tipped fields. Claire woke to the howl of wind rattling the barn doors, and a low, ominous rumble of thunder in the distance. The storm wasn't just a backdrop, it was a threat. Every fence post she had repaired, every paddock she had secured, suddenly felt fragile against the power of nature. And the stallion, her once unmanageable problem horse, was tense, muscles rippling under his coat, ears flicking at every snap of the wind. Claire knew that the day ahead would push both of them to the edge. She fed the horses quickly, speaking softly to soothe their nerves. The stallion was restless, pacing like a coiled spring, and the mare mirrored his unease. Every instinct screamed caution, but she had no choice. She needed to ensure the farm's survival. That meant guiding the horses through flooded fields to check the irrigation channels, reinforcing the old barn walls, and rescuing stranded livestock. She mounted the stallion, feeling the familiar thrum of energy beneath her. It was both exhilarating and terrifying, the raw power of a creature who refused to be tamed, yet seemed to sense that she depended on him entirely. The first mini-crisis struck as they reached the north pasture. A large section of fencing had collapsed under the weight of saturated soil. Claire's heart leapt. If the horses got out, they could endanger themselves and the farm. She dismounted and tried to calm the stallion, whose eyes flared with both fear and defiance. This wasn't just obedience. This was mutual problem-solving. She whispered, "We can do this together. I need you to trust me." For the first time, the stallion didn't flinch away. He stood firm as she guided him to help herd the mare safely away from the broken fence, moving like a partner rather than a wild animal. By midday, Claire was drenched, mud splashed across her boots, yet the stallion had proven himself invaluable. He navigated the muddy terrain with precision, his instincts saving both herself and the mare from potential injury. It was a revelation. What had begun as a catastrophic auction error was revealing a resource she had never imagined. Each obstacle was no longer just a problem. It was a test of their bond, and they were passing with every step. But just as the storm reached its peak, a deeper, more personal challenge emerged. Claire's thoughts drifted back to the past, the farm she had inherited from her father, the countless nights she had spent alone tending to animals, the financial struggles that had nearly crushed her spirit. She realized that her fear of failure had mirrored the stallion's resistance. Both of them carried scars, one from the harshness of the world, the other from mistakes and neglect. And in that realization, she felt a surge of empathy stronger than any fear. The storm intensified, rain lashing against the barn, lightning flashing across the horizon. The mare panicked, whinnying in terror, and the stallion reared, muscles taut and trembling. Claire stayed calm, drawing on every lesson she had learned from years of working with horses. She approached the stallion slowly, voice steady, hands open, eyes locked in silent communication. "I need you to trust me. We can face this together." And in a moment that felt almost miraculous, the tension broke. The stallion nudged her gently with his nose, signaling his willingness to follow her lead despite the storm raging around them. With careful guidance, Claire led the two horses to the barn, securing them inside just as the wind tore at the paddocks outside. She sank to the floor, exhausted, mud-streaked, but elated. The bond had deepened. Trust had been tested and affirmed. And as she watched the stallion settle beside the mare, head lowering in quiet acceptance, she felt a profound sense of awe. This horse, once dismissed as a problem, was now the linchpin of hope, not just for the animals, but for the farm itself. That night, as the storm raged on, Claire reflected on the journey so far. Every obstacle, the auction error, the stallion's wildness, the collapsing fences, the relentless weather, had brought them closer. She whispered stories of her childhood, of dreams once lost, of her father's teachings about patience and resilience. The stallion listened attentively, ears flicking, eyes softening. There was a quiet understanding growing between them, a silent promise that they would face whatever challenges came next together. But just when Claire felt a measure of relief, the final twist arrived, a financial crisis threatening to take the farm entirely. The storm had destroyed part of the crop, leaving little to sell at the market. Equipment was damaged, bills piled up, and the weight of responsibility pressed down like never before. Claire realized that the stallion's role would extend far beyond mere companionship. He would have to become an active partner in survival. Over the next few days, Claire and the stallion worked in tandem to repair fences, guide livestock, and navigate the treacherous terrain left by the storm. Each day was a microcosm of tension, challenge, and triumph, a rhythm of problem-solving that mirrored their growing bond. She began to notice subtle cues, how he anticipated danger, how he responded to her shifts in weight, how his instincts complemented her knowledge. Together, they were no longer caretaker and horse. They were a team, capable of overcoming obstacles that alone would have seemed insurmountable. The stallion's transformation mirrored Claire's own journey. Where she had once doubted, he had once resisted. Now both moved with purpose, determination, and trust. The farm, which had seemed teetering on the brink of failure, now showed signs of revival. Fences repaired, livestock safe, the hidden pasture cleared and fertile. And yet, the greatest victory was not in the land or the animals. It was in the bond that had formed, a testament to patience, courage, and the unexpected miracles that arise from mistakes. By the end of Part 3, the story had reached a critical emotional and narrative peak. The storm and personal challenges escalated tension, showcased the stallion's value, and deepened the connection between human and horse. The audience is left on the edge, invested in whether the farm and their partnership will survive the coming trials. The following morning dawned grey and heavy, a lingering threat of another storm pressing on the horizon. Claire could feel tension in every corner of the farm, the air thick with anticipation. The past weeks had transformed the stallion from a problem into a partner, but now the stakes were higher than ever. A critical shipment of hay was due, and the northern fence, still weakened from the previous storm, threatened to collapse under even the slightest pressure. Every misstep could be catastrophic. Claire approached the stallion with a calm determination. She ran her hands along his coarse mane, whispering reassurances, feeling the subtle tremor of his muscles under her touch. "We've come so far," she murmured, "and now we face the biggest test yet." For the first time, the stallion seemed to understand, not just as a reaction, but as comprehension. His ears flicked forward, eyes fixed on her with a rare intensity. They had reached a pivotal moment. Mutual trust had to meet extreme challenge. The first test came swiftly. As they navigated the muddy path toward the northern pasture, a loose board snapped underfoot, startling the mare. She bolted, spinning toward the broken fence, hooves threatening to tear through the soft earth. Claire's heart raced. In a flash, the stallion intercepted her, his body angled to block the escape. He snorted, eyes wide, muscles taut, as Claire clutched his mane and guided both horses away from danger. The moment was brief, yet every second felt stretched by tension and fear. Once the immediate danger passed, Claire exhaled shakily. She realized the stallion had become more than a partner in work. He was now the guardian of the farm, instinctively responding to threats, protecting what mattered, and mirroring her own determination. But the trials were far from over. The mare, though calmer, remained skittish. Any wrong move could undo the fragile trust she had painstakingly built. The next crisis was a test of ingenuity. The hay delivery truck had arrived, but the storm had turned the driveway into a quagmire. The tires spun helplessly in the mud, threatening to sink completely. Claire's frustration boiled over, but the stallion moved instinctively, positioning himself to guide the truck driver's movements with subtle gestures, nudges, and carefully placed pressure. It was a breathtaking moment, a horse once deemed unmanageable now executing complex, almost human-like problem-solving. Claire's awe was tempered by relief. The farm's survival depended on this moment of partnership. Later that afternoon, as the sun broke through the clouds, a quiet, intimate moment unfolded. Claire sat beside the stallion in the paddock, brushing the rain-slicked coat that had once seemed untouchable. Memories of her father, the struggles of the farm, and the near disasters of the past weeks weighed heavily on her. She realized that the bond she shared with the stallion mirrored her journey. Patience, understanding, courage, and the capacity to forgive oneself for mistakes. She whispered, "We've both been through so much, but we made it. Together." Just as she leaned back to admire the fields, a sudden movement caught her eye. A young foal, abandoned and shivering near the edge of the forest, had wandered too close to the broken fence. Claire's pulse jumped. Without hesitation, the stallion bolted toward the foal, moving with grace and precision. He gently nudged it away from danger, guiding it toward safety with a tenderness that belied his powerful frame. Claire followed close behind, tears stinging her eyes. The transformation was complete. The horse who had arrived as a mistake, feared and dismissed, was now a hero, a protector, and a symbol of hope. The day's events culminated in a quiet revelation. As the foal settled near the mare, the stallion lowered his head, brushing Claire's shoulder in a gesture that spoke volumes. She realized something profound. The auction error had not been a mistake. It had been fate, delivering the very horse the farm needed. What had seemed like chaos was actually orchestration, a series of challenges designed to reveal courage, trust, and the untapped potential within both human and horse. That evening, Claire walked the paddocks alone, moonlight casting silver shadows over the land. She reflected on the journey. The storms, the runaway escapes, the fragile trust, the minor victories, and now the heroism that had emerged from chaos. Every heartbeat reminded her of the fragile balance between fear and hope, struggle and triumph. And she realized that the bond they had forged, through trials, challenges, and unexpected twists, was unbreakable. The dawn broke clear and bright, a warm golden light spilling across the paddocks and fields, a stark contrast to the storms and chaos of the previous weeks. Claire stepped outside, boots muddy, heart still racing from the previous day's trials. The farm, once teetering on the brink of failure, now pulsed with life. The mare grazed calmly, the young foal nestled close to her side, and the stallion, her once problem horse, stood sentinel, ears flicking, eyes sharp but serene. He had grown into his role, a guardian, a partner, and a symbol of the farm's resilience. Claire took a deep breath, letting the crisp morning air fill her lungs. The transformation of the farm mirrored the transformation of her own heart. She remembered the auction, the moment she realized she had bought the wrong horse, and how that single mistake had almost broken her. But now, every obstacle, every tense moment, every risk she had taken felt like a step in the journey toward something extraordinary. The horse had not just survived, it had thrived, and in doing so, it had inspired her to rise above her own fears. That morning, a delivery truck arrived with fresh supplies, and the stallion, ever intuitive, guided the driver down the newly reinforced driveway, ears forward, hooves steady. Claire watched, marveling at the ease with which he coordinated, the quiet intelligence in his every move. It was more than a display of training, it was a display of mutual respect, partnership, and trust. She reached out to stroke his mane, feeling the warmth of life, energy, and purpose radiating from him. "You weren't a mistake," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You were exactly what we needed." Over the next few weeks, the farm began to flourish. The crops that survived the storm thrived under careful attention. Livestock gained strength and confidence, and the hidden pasture, once forgotten, became a sanctuary for the mare and foal. Claire found herself smiling more, laughing more, and waking each morning with renewed energy. The stallion had become more than a helper. He was a teacher, showing her patience, courage, and the unexpected beauty that can come from embracing chaos. News of the farm's transformation spread slowly through the nearby community. Neighbors came to see the miraculous horse who had turned a struggling farm into a thriving one. They were captivated not just by his strength, but by the story of trust, perseverance, and the bond between human and animal. Claire shared her tale quietly, humbly, emphasizing that it was not just the horse but the partnership, the willingness to face challenges together, that had made the difference. The emotional apex came one late afternoon. As Claire stood in the paddock, the sky painted in brilliant oranges and pinks. The stallion, mare, and foal moved together in the golden light, a perfect picture of harmony and hope. Claire's heart swelled with gratitude and wonder. She realized that this journey was more than just a story of survival, it was a story of transformation, of the miracles that can emerge from mistakes, and of the extraordinary bonds that form when trust is given, risk is embraced, and hearts remain open. In that moment, Claire spoke softly to the camera, or to anyone listening, anyone watching their journey unfold. Sometimes, what seems like a mistake is actually fate. Sometimes, the challenges that scare us the most are the ones that reveal our greatest strengths. Trust, patience, and a willingness to embrace the unexpected. These are what create miracles. She looked at the stallion, eyes full of emotion. "And you changed everything." The story closes with a sweeping shot of the farm, the fields alive with growth, the barn standing sturdy and proud, the horses grazing peacefully under the fading sun. Claire walks among them, smiling, whispering gentle words, her hand brushing the stallion's mane. There is a sense of completion, of balance restored, and yet the journey continues, filled with promise and hope. The auction era, once feared as a catastrophe, had become the defining moment, the miracle that saved the farm and created a bond that would endure forever. Finally, Claire turns to the audience one last time, a warm smile crossing her face. If this story touched your heart, share it, subscribe, and remember, sometimes the unexpected brings the greatest blessings. The camera pans to the stallion, his eyes glinting with intelligence and trust, the mare and foal close by, and the sun setting behind the hills, casting a golden glow that promises hope, resilience, and new beginnings. And so ends the story. The farm saved, the bond forged, and the once problem horse revealed as a hero, a teacher, and the unexpected miracle that changed everything.